White people don't pass out like that, said the boy, poking the collapsed man's cheek with a stick. He's too shiny to be dead. July heat pressed down on the cracked sidewalks of Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward, warping the air like steam from a pot. Jamal was 5, barefoot, shirtless, and hungry. His shorts were hand-me-downs from an older cousin he never met, the elastic held up by a shoestring tied in a bow. He had $1 in his pocket, a crumpled relic of yesterday's kindness, and no idea what he was going to eat for dinner. Again, the park was his escape, his jungle gym, his quiet world. Trees didn't judge. Birds didn't flinch when he walked by. And benches? They let him sit as long as he wanted. That's where he found the man. A white guy in a navy three-piece suit sprawled across the grass like someone unplugged him. His phone lay on the path beside him, its screen spiderweb from a fall. No one around him seemed to care. Some walked faster. Some glanced and turned away. One woman took a photo and kept moving. That's when Jamal poked him. "Hey, mister," he said, more curious than concerned. "You sick or just fancy tired?" The man didn't answer. His face was pale, lips blue. His Rolex flashed in the sun. Jamal stared at it like it belonged in a museum, not on a stranger melting into grass. He looked around. Still no help. Just judgment and silence. So Jamal did what he'd seen his grandma do when Uncle Terry passed out on Christmas morning. He got on his knees. He placed 2 tiny fingers on the man's neck. He pressed, light and scared. Still beaten, he mumbled. Then louder, he got a heartbeat. A woman with jogging earbuds ignored him. A guy on a scooter shouted something and rolled by. No one stopped. So Jamal stood up, ran to the nearest trash can, tore out a water bottle half full of lukewarm backwash, and dumped it on the man's face. The billionaire gasped. His eyes flared open, like rebooting a machine. He coughed violently, body spasming, eyes darting toward the boy. What happened?" "You died. But then you didn't," Jamal said with the sternness of a doctor. "You thirsty?" The man blinked. He tried to sit up, but failed. Jamal placed a hand on his chest. "Don't. You got like billionaire asthma or something?" You felt like a tree. Boom. A crowd had begun to gather finally. Now that the white man in a suit was awake, suddenly everyone had questions. Phones were out. Someone called 911. Someone else whispered, "Isn't that Richard Halden?" The name floated through the air like magic. Richard Halden, CEO of Evermerk, billionaire investor, media titan, philanthropist, suspected political kingmaker. Worth $27 billion, according to Google. Jamal didn't have Google, but he had eyes and ears, and now a responsibility. Sirens wailed in the distance. The man wheezed, coughing into his sleeve. What's your name, kid?" "Jamal." "How old are you, Jamal?" 5.5. You saved me. I just poked you and poured trash water on your face." Jamal shrugged. "Wasn't nothing. You would have woke up. Maybe." Richard laughed. A strange sound, raspy, grateful, maybe a little ashamed. "No, son. I wouldn't have. I think I had a heart attack. You rich people can't even eat right, huh?" More laughter. People were filming now. Jamal didn't care. He stood beside the man like a soldier guarding a treasure. EMS arrived. They swarmed Richard, checked vitals, slid him onto a stretcher. Jamal started to back away. That's when Richard grabbed his wrist. "Wait." His voice was hoarse, barely audible. He motioned for the EMT to stop. He looked Jamal in the eyes. "What you whispered to me." "I ain't saying nothing," Jamal replied. Richard shook his head slowly. "You did. When I came back, you leaned in and said something." Jamal paused, unsure, then nodded. "Oh, yeah. What did you say?" The boy leaned in again, this time to whisper into Richard's ear, calm and clear. "Now you know what it feels like when no one comes." The world stood still. Richard's expression changed like gravity had tripled on his face. Shame, realization, something cracking deep inside him. The EMS team waited awkwardly. Reporters were starting to show. Cameras zoomed in. The moment passed in seconds, but its echo would last much longer. Jamal walked away. No one stopped him. No one offered him food, or shoes, or even a bottle of clean water. The boy wandered to his bench beneath the tree, sat, and watched as the rich man he'd just saved was rolled into an ambulance. The next day, Jamal's name was everywhere. Boy hero saves billionaire. Tiny guardian angel of Atlanta. But Jamal didn't have a phone, didn't watch the news. He only knew something was different when strangers came to the park looking for him. TV vans, photographers. One lady brought a balloon and a happy meal. He didn't touch either. When Richard Halden finally emerged from the hospital 3 days later, he held a press conference on the steps. His hair was combed, his suit sharp, but his voice trembled. I had never known what helplessness felt like, he said. Never truly understood what it meant to be ignored. That little boy Jamal, he saved my life. But more than that, he showed me something I'd spent my entire life avoiding. He looked straight into the camera. I'm a man who has built empires, crushed rivals, and spoken at the UN. But a 5-year-old black child reminded me I was human, and I owe him my life. Jamal was watching from a bodega TV window. He looked down at his feet, still bare. He shrugged. Toes still dirty, he muttered. The real story had only just begun. Jamal didn't understand why strangers kept calling him the miracle boy. He didn't feel like a miracle. He felt hungry, tired, like the park was less safe now that everyone knew his name. By Thursday morning, the benches weren't empty anymore. Reporters camped with umbrellas. Bloggers in yoga pants asked him if he had a message of hope for their followers. A preacher tried to baptize him with bottled water. One man even offered to buy the stick Jamal had used to poke Richard Halden, claiming it was historically significant. Jamal clutched the stick tighter and walked away. He missed the quiet, missed how the park used to be just his. Back at the rundown 2-bedroom apartment he shared with Grandma Lottie and his baby cousin Amir, the door had been broken for months. Grandma said prayers before every meal, even when there wasn't one. Jamal knew the sound of eviction notices better than bedtime stories. But now things had changed. The morning after the press conference, a black town car pulled up outside their building. A man in a sharp suit knocked on their door, holding a manila envelope. "Mrs. Lottie Washington?" he asked. "That's me. I represent Mr. Richard Halden. He asked me to deliver this personally." He handed her the envelope and left. No explanations. Inside was a letterhander and a check. Jamal peeked over Grandma's shoulder as she read it aloud. "Dear Mrs. Washington, your grandson saved my life. But more than that, he showed me my own soul. I can never repay him for what he gave me in that moment, but I would like to try. Enclosed is a check. It's not charity. It's gratitude. And it's a promise. This is only the beginning. Humbly, Richard Halden." The check was for $1 million. Grandma Lottie's knees buckled. Jamal thought she was going to faint. Instead, she started shouting praises to the Lord, dancing barefoot on the linoleum floor while Amir cried in the background. For the first time in years, Jamal felt what silence inside a home should sound like: not fear, not sirens, not shouting, but peace. But peace didn't last long. The money changed everything and everyone. That night, a cousin they hadn't spoken to in 5 years showed up at their door, claiming he'd always been there for the family. A woman from a church they didn't attend asked if Jamal could speak at their Sunday service. Even the apartment manager who'd threatened eviction last week came by with a fruit basket and a fresh lease offer. And then came the cameras. They showed up every day, outside the school, in the park, even outside their home. At first, Jamal thought it was cool. They called him inspiring, asked him to smile for pictures, wanted to know his favorite food, his dreams, if he liked Spider-Man or Batman better. But they never asked him what scared him, what hurt, what he really whispered. No one cared about that part. Then came the interview. CNN, primetime. Richard Halden wanted Jamal to appear with him on live TV. They would sit side by side, a black boy from the projects, a white billionaire with a second chance. "We'll fly you both to New York," said Richard's assistant on the phone. "First class, full suite, clothes, meals, everything covered." Grandma said yes before Jamal could speak. He didn't know how to tell her he didn't want to go. He didn't want to be famous. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted his park back. The CNN set was cold. Big lights, fake smiles, people adjusting his collar like he was a mannequin. They gave him juice in a champagne glass and told him to wave when the camera started rolling. Richard Halden sat beside him, wearing a tailored gray suit, his hair perfect. "Ready, champ?" he asked. Jamal nodded, but didn't smile. When the show began, the host leaned in, full of admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we bring you a story that's captured the heart of America. A young boy, just 5 years old, saved the life of billionaire Richard Halden and, in doing so, changed both their lives forever. Let's hear it directly from them." The audience applauded. Jamal stared at his shoes. Richard spoke first, polished and practiced. He reminded me that humanity isn't about wealth or power, but connection. In my moment of greatest need, it wasn't a doctor or bodyguard who saved me. It was a child, a stranger, a hero. More applause. Then the host turned to Jamal. "And what did you say to Mr. Halden, Jamal?" "We woke up. The whole world wants to know." Jamal hesitated. The studio held its breath. He looked at the lights, at the crowd, then at Richard. He remembered the man's eyes that day, wet, frantic, grateful. He remembered the whisper, and how real it felt. Jamal leaned toward the microphone. "I said, 'Now you know what it feels like when no one comes.'" Gasps from the audience. The host froze. Richard's smile flickered. "But I wasn't talking about just that moment," Jamal continued, voice steady. "I was talking about every time I cried and nobody came. Every time me or my cousins got sick and we had to wait 6 hours at the ER. Every night the lights went off because we couldn't pay the bill. Every time the cops rolled by our block, but didn't stop when a kid got hurt. That's what I meant." Silence. Then applause, but hesitant, unsure. Jamal stood up. "I didn't save him to be famous. I just saw someone on the ground, and he looked like my uncle that died. So I helped. That's it. And I hope if I fall down one day, someone helps me too." He walked off the set. He left Richard behind. The cameras, the questions. America didn't know what to do with that. Back home, things got quieter. Less attention. Fewer headlines. The money was still there, but Jamal noticed how different people acted now. Some teachers spoke to him with rehearsed kindness. Some friends stopped coming over. Some grown-ups whispered ungrateful when he passed. But Jamal slept better, talked more, drew pictures of people helping people, not just billionaires and kids on magazine covers. One day, a white van pulled up to the park. Out came a team of workers. They dug, measured, leveled ground. 2 weeks later, they unveiled a new bench bronze, polished and bolted into concrete. Etched across the back was a quote, "Now you know what it feels like when no one comes." And beneath that, dedicated to Jamal Washington, age 5, in honor of courage, clarity, and compassion. Jamal touched the metal. It felt warm under the sun. Richard Halden stood beside him, hands in pockets. "I thought it'd be better than a statue," he said. Jamal nodded. "It is. You still don't like me much, do you?" Jamal looked up. "I like you better now." "Why's that?" "You listen more." Richard smiled. "I'm learning." Jamal walked away, leaving the man behind again. But this time, Richard didn't stop him. He didn't need to. They both understood something now. Change doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes in whispers. And sometimes it comes from the mouth of a 5-year-old barefoot prophet with a stick in his hand and a lesson in his heart the world wasn't ready to hear. Weeks passed. The world moved on. As it always does. The headlines faded. The reporters stopped showing up. Jamal, once dubbed the soul of America, was now just a boy again mostly. Except now he had shoes and food and a new school in a better part of town. But something in him had changed too. He didn't laugh as freely as before. Not because he was sad, but because he now saw things. In people, in rooms, in silences. He watched how grown-ups carried pain they never spoke about. How teachers flinched when a loud noise broke the room. How white neighbors smiled tight-lipped when Grandma Lottie waved. He saw how everyone wanted him to stay humble, but what they really meant was quiet. One afternoon, during recess at his new private school, a boy named Caleb asked him if he had ever really saved the billionaire. "My dad says it was probably staged," Caleb said, "to make rich people look good. You were just a mascot." Jamal blinked. "I saved him. I didn't plan it. And I ain't no mascot." Caleb laughed, tossed his juice box on the grass, and walked away. That night, Jamal asked Grandma if he could go back to his old school. "You sure, baby? The new one got books with covers. Cafeteria don't serve green meat." "I know, but I don't belong there. I don't want to be a symbol no more." Lottie stroked his head. "You're not a symbol. You're my grandson, but you got to learn when to stay and when to stand." Jamal didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, he woke up before dawn, put on his cleanest shirt, and walked back to the park bench. His bench, the one with the quote. He sat in silence, watched the sun stretch across the grass like honey, and he waited. Richard came at 8 a.m. sharp. No security, no driver. He walked alone with a coffee and a fold-up chair. "Mind if I sit?" Jamal shrugged. They sat in silence for a while. Then Jamal asked, "You still rich?" Richard chuckled. "Yeah, haven't given it all away yet." "Why not?" "I'm working on it." "You said it was just the beginning." "That letter. To Grandma." Richard nodded. "And I meant it." "So what now?" That question lingered. Richard didn't answer right away. He stared across the park. A black girl was teaching her little brother how to dribble. 2 older men were playing chess under a pavilion. Someone's grandma was shouting at squirrels. "This city is full of people who don't get seen," Richard finally said. "That's the real heart attack I had, Jamal. Being invisible to everything that's not profitable." Jamal tilted his head. "So, you want to help people now?" "I want to make sure no kid ever says what you said to me again." "Then you got to start here, where it hurts." Richard turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "You helped build downtown. Stadiums, skyscrapers, fancy condos. But you never built here. My street still got broken glass on the sidewalk. My cousin still sleeps 3 to a bed. We don't need statues. We need space. Silence." Then Richard smiled, slow and real. "You ever thought of running a nonprofit?" Jamal laughed for the first time in weeks. "I'm 6 now." "Well," Richard said, pulling a folder from his coat, "here's your first board meeting." He handed Jamal the plans. They weren't flashy, just sketches, ideas. But they were his ideas. Playgrounds with shade, a community center, a health clinic with walk-in hours, a reading program with real black authors, a mental health van that parked in every neighborhood once a week. And in the corner next to a small garden floated a tiny bronze plaque with the words, "Listen before you fix." Jamal flipped through the pages, slower now. "You serious?" "I have the money. You have the voice." Jamal looked at him hard. "Don't just do it to feel good." "I'm doing it because I feel now," Richard said. "Because that day you poured trash water on me, I didn't just wake up. I woke up." Jamal grinned. "Well, damn, billionaire. Language, sir. They both laughed. The first building opened 6 months later. The Jamal Washington Center for Community Healing. Free tutoring, therapy, family meals every Friday. Richard didn't cut the ribbon, Jamal did, with Amir on his hip and Grandma Lottie crying in the background. They planted a tree next to the playground. Jamal asked if they could name it Enough. What? Richard asked. Because maybe if we grow enough of these, people will stop saying we aren't. That quote went viral again. People started coming not for autographs or photos, but to volunteer, to listen, to ask, what do you need? One day, a teacher from Jamal's old school stopped by and handed him a note from a boy who'd been bullied for stuttering. It read, "You made me feel seen. I want to help too." Jamal tucked it in his pocket and never told anyone, not even Richard, because some things you keep closed not because they're secrets, but because they're sacred. 1 year later, Jamal turned 7. At his birthday party in the community center, gym surrounded by kids, balloons, and barbecue, Richard gave him a small velvet box. Jamal opened it to find a necklace with a simple silver tag. One word engraved. Whisper. I want you to always remember the power you carry, even when you speak soft, Richard said. Jamal put on, looked at the crowd of kids playing tag, the mural of black leaders painted across the far wall, and smiled. Don't worry, he said. I'll whisper louder next time. And the world, if it was lucky, would be listening. By the time Jamal turned 10, whispers had turned into movements. The Jamal Washington Centers expanded from Atlanta to cities across the South: Birmingham, Jackson, Baton Rouge, Memphis. Each one painted in the colors Jamal chose himself. Gold, forest green, and deep red colors of soil, hope, and heart. They weren't clinics. They weren't schools. They weren't churches. They were sanctuaries, places where no one had to beg to be seen. And Jamal? He had grown, not just in inches, but in purpose. He didn't talk much in crowds, but when he did, rooms went still. People leaned in, not because he was famous, but because he didn't waste words. When he spoke, it meant something. One day, during a televised Q&A at a news center in Charlotte, a reporter asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Jamal answered, "More." The audience chuckled, but he didn't smile. "I want to be more than what the world expects from kids who look like me. I want to be more than a moment, more than a charity story, more than a whisper." And then he looked at the camera. "And I want y'all to be more too." The clip went viral. Again. But Jamal never chased the clicks. He chased impact. The money Richard had promised continued to flow, but under one condition. Jamal had final say. "Not a dollar gets spent if it don't make kids freer," he'd said once. And Richard respected it. Their bond had deepened into something more than gratitude. It had turned into a true partnership, sometimes even friendship. But it wasn't perfect. They argued, especially when investors wanted to scale too fast, or when a center director suggested branding Jamal as the face of modern redemption. "You think I'm a product?" Jamal asked him bluntly. "No, but the world loves symbols." "Then let's make one that fights back." He approved a mural the next day, a painting of 100 anonymous hands lifting a child, not because he was special, but because they chose to. He signed the bottom with one word, enough. But with fame came friction. Some politicians accused the centers of being radical. They didn't like the literacy programs that included authors like James Baldwin and bell hooks. They especially didn't like the mental health vans that showed up in tough neighborhoods and asked kids about trauma. "They're poisoning children with anti-American ideas," one pundit claimed on live TV. Jamal responded by inviting him to a round table. On camera, the man declined. So Jamal invited 6 teenagers instead. They sat in a circle, talked about fear, about race, about why one girl carried her brother's asthma pump in her backpack, even though it made her classmates laugh. And when she finished, Jamal leaned in and whispered, "They're afraid of your truth 'cause they built their world on hiding from it." That clip quiet and grainy reached more hearts than 1,000 speeches. Still, not everyone welcomed the change. One night, someone vandalized the original Atlanta bench. They spray-painted "fake" across the plaque, dumped garbage over the flower beds, left a note: "He's just a kid, not God." When Richard showed up the next morning, ready to organize cleanup, he found Jamal already there, scrubbing. "Alone. You don't have to do this," Richard said gently. "I know," Jamal replied, "but I want them to see we don't run when they push." Richard knelt beside him. Together, they cleaned in silence. 2 days later, 100 volunteers showed up to repaint the whole park. They called it the Garden of Echoes, a living memorial to all the things people try to silence. And on the wall nearest the playground, they added a new quote: "A whisper can shake the world if the world dares to listen." Jamal didn't attend the ceremony. He was in Chicago, meeting with the youth council. But when someone sent him a picture, he smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Told y'all." At 16, he started writing. Not speeches, not memoirs, stories, fiction, fables, parables that looked like fairy tales but held truths sharper than knives. One story about a boy who tamed a lion by crying. Another about a city built on tears that floated above the ground, invisible to those who never wept. His first book was titled "Nobody Came." It sold out in days. By then, universities were begging him to apply. Harvard, Stanford, Morehouse. He chose none. He started his own institute instead, the Whisper Collective, a place for young organizers, artists, and thinkers from underrepresented communities to gather, plan, dream. "You ain't gotta wait till you're grown to build the world," Jamal told the first class. "The world been waiting on you." And the room shook not from applause, but from understanding. The collective sparked global interest. From South Africa to Brazil, from indigenous youth in Canada to undocumented kids in Texas, Jamal's model spread. Not with branding, not with press, but through trust, word of mouth, and a quiet kind of fire. And through it all, Richard stayed close. Never in front, never controlling, just present and proud. Until one day, he wasn't. Richard passed away at age 72 from a sudden stroke. The obituary read, "Philanthropist, titan, transformed by a boy who whispered truth into his heart." At the funeral, cameras packed the pews. But Jamal didn't speak at the podium. Instead, he stood by Richard's casket, placed a small bottle of Atlanta Park water inside, and whispered, "Rest now." You came. No one else heard the words. But somehow, everyone felt them. Jamal kept building. By the time he turned 25, he had started a global education fund, a health justice incubator, and a prison arts program called Paint Me Free. And yet, when a journalist asked him what his proudest moment was, he said, "That day, in the park, when I chose not to walk away." They asked him how he learned to be brave. He replied, "I didn't. I just got tired of watching people fall." Years later, when Jamal himself was old and gray, his name printed in history books, his face on postage stamps, they asked him to reflect. In a rare interview, with his grandchild beside him, he answered with tears in his eyes, "People think I changed the world that day, but I didn't. I just showed the world the part of itself it was too scared to look at." He looked down at his hand, still steady, still strong, and I whispered. His grandchild looked up. "Whisper what, Grandpa?" Jamal smiled. Truth, but soft enough that even the hearts hiding in shadows could hear it. Outside the interview studio, a statue stood. Not of Jamal, not of Richard, but of a small park bench empty beside a bronze stick. A plaque beneath it read, "To all who feel unseen, someone is listening. Don't stop whispering." And so, the story never really ended. Because somewhere, right now, another child is kneeling beside someone forgotten, and another whisper is waiting to change the world. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.